have out there? Let's see if this thing is working. Somebody is out there, although I cannot see. I really can't see you guys. I am not in a position I can't see the chat room. Sorry about that. So if I do happen to answer anything from anybody, it will most certainly have to be by the Spirit. It is, well, close to the midnight hour. And I did miss that broadcast. I was detained, literally detained, and I couldn't make it then. However, I was tampering with the website, right? I'm at breakneck speed getting your accounts ready because I'm motivated by two groups, the Men of Standard and the Ladies of Grace, of which Angela is going to be beginning, and a very special group that I've never done before. A very special group for men or women. Very, very special group. We'll likely meet once a month for the very, very special group. All right? And, anybody out there who wants to join that group, it's not one of those groups where you just show up. No. There are going to be some things you have to fill out. I can tell you this already. By the Spirit of the Lord, I'll be able to read any submission. I'll know the truth, and you may or may not be in that group, period. Okay? So that's how that's going to work, right? Tonight, or this evening, while it's not a normal subject, I'm going to begin to talk about some technical things tonight, dealing with atmospherics and possibly energetic particles that are coming into our world to give you a true mindset of a few things, okay? Because normally I hear, now don't want anybody to be offended, but you guys have heard about chemtrails, correct? Right? Now you guys know I never go into detail about such things except to say, it's not garbage of what you're hearing. Now some of the information may or may not be qualified with you, but it's not a subject that you just simply discount. Now, it is possible that many people have assumed or took a position concerning chemtrails, and so they will never see the entire truth about it, right? Not the entire truth. So I'm going to talk a little about that. Energetic particles, I will talk about, because we have, last year specifically, when the Earth and the solar system was exposed to increased doses of energetic particles, you may call that radiation. It was caused by something out there that I never really addressed directly. Okay? Now, with that comes another. It is approaching. It's building up. I guess you could think of it like if we were all surfers, right? Then let's just say that we see the one before the big one approaching very fast. So fast, right? That physics has been thrown out of the window already. So let's say physics does not apply to what we are experiencing. All right? I'm going to cover some of that too. But the debris is phenomenal. The chemical composition of the debris is that's going to be enough to deal with, right? Also, we're going to talk about how that agencies and people have been attempting to mitigate the circumstances of this planet desperately. Listen, when I tell you this, I'm telling you a truth. The powers to be are desperate. Do you understand? They're desperate not to die. They're desperate not to die. They foresaw something coming a long time ago, and they're taking it seriously, and most people are not. I'm going to talk about some of that. In fact, I may start with that, because that has to do with the truth of chemtrailing. It really does. Now, if you don't understand what chemtrails are, if you don't really comprehend what they are, on occasion you'll see an aircraft leaving what's called a contrail, right? A contrail is nothing more, because it's very cold up there, right? It's essentially some of the water vapor that comes off of the burning engine and formed around that burning engine leaves a contrail, right, with ice particles, correct? But there's a hitch here. A contrail is one thing. Chemtrails are different. They call them chemtrails. I do not call them chemtrails. I call them something else, because I have insight into what they're doing. And it goes side by side with HAARP and with CERN. It really does. All are tied in together. But most people have been looking from a perspective that the government is trying to kill everybody. It's not the truth. No, it's not truth. So let me explain this to you so you can understand what I'm talking about. Please, let me explain this. If you lived in a home that was a $60 billion home, right, in a neighborhood where you have the most expensive house, let me ask you something. Now remember, I can't see the chat room, and I don't like that, but I cannot see it. Hopefully it comes up later. But if you lived in a $60 billion home and you invested your hard-earned money in this home, right, and you knew a hurricane was coming in about a month, and somebody gave you some sure science, because let's just say they had figured out how to predict storms 90 days in advance. So you knew a hurricane was coming directly in your neighborhood, and it was a 88% probability that your house would be flattened. What would you begin to do? Now remember, in this home that costs billions of dollars, you have servants in that home, right? You have other folks in that home. What would you do? What would you do? Anybody? Would you dispatch? First of all, you would sit down and you'd say, okay, here would be your normal thought pattern. Oh, and you have a big family, and you're the provider for all of them. But you have a house that is worth so much, and your entire life is invested in this house, right, that you couldn't possibly downgrade and go somewhere else. So, the first thing you would do is sit down, and you would begin to discuss and think about how you could save. If you had a good heart, you'd say, how can I save my children? Because I cannot leave my state. There's nowhere for us to go. They wouldn't survive if we went to a lesser lifestyle. They would not survive psychologically. So then you would automatically begin to say, I've got to protect this place so I can keep the integrity of my family and everything we work so hard for. I can keep them all together. Let's say you had a family of about 200 people. You live in a state, in a $90 billion estate, right? So you would try to preserve that estate, because in that estate is your legacy. It is everything you have worked for. It is what you're going to pass down to your children so that they can carry on whatever you started, and they can take your place. So let's just say a legacy is involved in everything else. Well, immediately you're going to want to protect your family, and then you're going to say, well, I've got to protect this place that they may continue. Right? Now, nobody else knows, just you. Okay? That's a scenario. Nobody else knows, just you. So what would you begin to do? First, if you had that amount of time, let's say you had 3 years. Let's do it that way. That's a little better. That the weather patterns indicate in 3 years your home is going to be flattened by a hypercane. But it's not now. So you would begin testing, doing things. In the meanwhile, you would be thinking of every scenario that could possibly take that place away. You will also think of the aftermath. You wouldn't just think of the storm, but you would be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, when this thing hits, there are going to be few left around ever. Hardly anybody's going to be left, because most people are going to perish in this. Right? So in this scenario, you already have determined many people will die. Correct? And folks, if you can tolerate me for a little bit, in this small story is going to be the most information I've ever given in my life to anybody online. All right? So then you have determined some things. In fact, help me out in this story, because I need to explain this for you. Here's the scenario again for those of you who didn't catch it. You have a $90 billion estate. You have a family count of 200. You have servants and everything else on your property. You have worked your whole life to build that estate. All of your research, all of the knowledge, all of the tools and everything are bound within that estate. Because you have children, you want to pass this estate over to your children, but it has a threat against it. You were informed in 3 years the weather patterns would form in a way that it would cause a hurricane to rip through the earth. That is the scenario. And the question is, what do you think you would begin to do? So, we're going to go through that. First of all, you're thinking about the storm. You just heard about the storm. You didn't know that before. So before you make any preparations, you start saying, oh my goodness, your first thought is, I could lose everything. My children could die. My family could die. I could lose everything. And then you're going to drift towards, before you do anything, you're going to say, this is going to kill a lot of people. So you have determined that many people will die. Most of the people will die. They won't survive it. Right? Then you begin to think, if many people die, those who are alive are going to be hunting for food, resources, and things of that nature, which could threaten my family because I can't accommodate all of them. Now you're in a real pickle. So first you determine many people will die. You have to deal with that. Second is this. You're going to begin to weigh the scales. What do I protect? My family or my estate? Which one? So naturally, if you have a good heart, you're going to say, my family carries the estate within them. So I'm going to try and make that work. But you know what's going to be a surface storm? So you begin to build a mansion below your mansion at the bottom. But you just don't build it. You're building it to sustain your family for at least 1 to 3 years until they can come topside. Why? Because it takes 1 to 3 years for people to actually starve to death. And you know that. So you're saying, I'm going to build an underground structure, right? We're not even at the heart of this, because these are things that you know. To build an underground structure to house your family would be a pretty big structure. In that structure, you would have to have some type of artificial sunlight. You'd have to grow plants and make sure that everybody had some type of sunlight, because you can't live in a subterranean environment absent sunlight. The human body is not made for that. Which, because you're so rich, you would begin to what? Initiate experiments. But for what reason? To save your family. Because if you go subterranean, in the absence of sunlight, your body goes haywire. So you would have to replicate the sun in that environment. Not actually create a sun in the environment, but take all the processes of the sun and what the sun yields in the body, and then replicate that either by an injection, a pill, exposed metals, or whatever. You'd have to replicate the benefits and the disadvantages of the sun on the human body, that they will be healthy. So you would have to initiate experiments. So what do we have here? We have determined that many people will die. You have to initiate experiments, but why? Because you're going to be living in a subterranean environment for at least 1 to 3 years. Everything has to be replicated. It will be artificial. It has to be replicated. So you would initiate experiments. Remember, your goal is to keep your family alive. Why, though? Because your family carries your legacy. Now, keep in mind, during this time, you're going to say, well, I'm going to build the underground facility. I'm going to initiate projects to simulate the earth, the air of the earth, the sunlight of the earth, the changes from day to night on the earth. All these work with biological processes. I need to work with gravitational pull of the earth based upon the moon. All these things you'll begin to exploit and experiment with, so you can replicate a normal environment in a subterranean environment. So we have that. We've determined many people are going to die by this storm, by this hypercane. And that you have to save your family by moving them in a safe place, immune to everything which would be underground. Once you get them on the ground, before you get them on the ground, in the construction of the underground facilities, you have to replicate all elements of the surface of the earth. All right? Hydroponics included. What would be your next thing? Because you want them healthy and everything else, but what will be the next thing? Here it is. You ready? You say, wait a minute. If I dig, you're going to ask what I'm doing. In that scenario, when the storm comes, because they don't know, they're going to try to find a way of escape. Everybody is going to try to find a way of escape when they see it with their own eyes. It's coming. When this storm is coming, they're going to try to find a way of escape. So what we have to do, you're already determined, I can't let anybody know about this. They can never know anything about this. So then what do you have? Number 3, you have secrecy. Secrecy. Secrecy of what, though? Secrecy of the underground experiment, and secrecy, or the underground facility, and secrecy of the initiated experiments. Okay? You can't tell anybody why, because if they find out that you have an underground facility, if they find out about the research, it does something. Here's what it does. To know of an underground facility is one thing. But if you knew that someone was replicating elements of the surface of the earth for the purposes of living under the earth, that would prove to you that they're doing something for real, and it's not just phony. So then you could never allow anyone to know both at one time. You would then understand that you can let people know about the experiments. You can let people know about the underground bases, but you can never let people know they go hand in hand. And then you would say, do you guys understand that part? Do you understand that? So what do we have here? We have secrecy. Secrecy of what? Secrecy of number 2, which is the underground facility, and the initiation of experiments. You can never let people know about the 2 of them at the same time. All right? You can never do that. Remember, you have 3 years to prepare, so you're not going to waste your time on things. Now, time becomes of the essence. Number 4, guess what you're going to say? I have to utilize every single day for the advantage of, I don't have enough time, is what you'll say. I don't have enough time. So because I don't have enough time, how in the world am I going to do this without causing attention? How do you do that? So guess what you begin to do? You begin to shuffle the bookwork. Instead, when you buy concrete things, you develop a phony project under infrastructure development. People will never ask questions about that. And so what you do, because you have 3 years, let's say 3 years, you'll keep programs like that on schedule. And when you begin to ship materials, you bring them in, but you designate you do this 5 times per year. Not all at once, not continuous, 5 times per year. Why do you do that? Because people will assume those materials are going toward other building programs. And when you purchase these things, if somebody says, well, where is it going? You start scratching your head and say, wow, wait a minute. Okay, so I'm going to hide the materials I need is what they're doing. Hide how they get here by public programs. These are by public programs. But if somebody looked at the paperwork, they're going to see the items, right? They're going to say those items are not used for roads. This item is not used for highways. What is this item? So how do you hide that? So then you begin to contact established entities. And you ask them, you begin to market. Hey, I need someone to build so-and-so. Here's the trick, though. Let's just say you needed, let me make it simple. Let's say you needed a bunch of touchpads for a phone, right? But you don't want anybody to know you're getting the touchpads for a phone. If you were rich, all you'd have to do is say, hey, I need an unbreakable touchpad developed. I need the statistics on your experiments of what you're doing with the touchpads. Because if you do that, then somebody else is doing R&D with the materials you actually need, and no one will ever suspect. Those materials of which they're using for R&D are going somewhere else. They would assume is for research and development. Therefore, anything with the R&D on it, it doesn't matter what. You could have a silly item in there. You could have a crazy item in there. Nobody cares. It's for R&D. Because with research and development, believe it or not, they don't track materials that way. They expect anybody who is an R&D company to utilize weird materials, new things, to see what works and what does not work. That's why you have R&D. So then with exotic materials, nobody cares. Nobody cares with exotic materials. People won't ask questions. They'll say, well, that stuff a secret. Who cares? They don't care about that. You see? So that is the other one. Hiding the materials with public companies. No one's going to ask that question. So now that you have that figured out, and you say, yes, I can get the materials, I can get the construction done, I'm going to be secret. I'll never let people understand about the underground facility and the initiation of experiments side by side. And now people are going to die. So what's the next step? You don't trust your family to keep that secret. So how do you deal with them? See, that's going to be the next step. You can't just tell everybody in your family what you're doing. But you need them to stay together. You need the ones you have selected to stay close. You need to have accountability of them. How do you do that? So if you were the richest person on the face of the earth, how would you do that? I'll tell you how. Through common everyday technology. You don't tell your family members anything, but you track them everywhere they go. And they'll never suspect a thing. You track them everywhere they go. They won't suspect a thing. How do you do that? By the assignment of a phone number. A simple assignment of a phone number tracks them wherever they go. Why is that so important? Because even if they don't carry their phones, somebody near them will carry theirs. Somebody always has a phone within 100 feet of everybody else. At best, they're within 5 miles of everybody else. So as long as everybody has a cell phone, you can track anybody, even those without one. You do this not because you're spying on them, not because you want to know their business. It's because you need to have accountability of your family members. In so doing, there's a consequence, though, because if you're the richest person on earth, you couldn't do it just with certain devices because they would exchange them. You don't want them to know anything, so what do? You create a standard within the infrastructure of the internet. And if you're the rich guy, you're the one that's the rich guy will go to Washington and say, hey, we need privacy. That's what you would say. We need privacy. Why would you go to the White House and tell people we need privacy when you need to monitor everybody? It's because you know how the public reacts and you know how behavioral sciences are. If you run to an organization saying we need privacy, here's what happens. First, they talk about it. Then they look at everything these software companies are doing, right? And then they tell the software companies, well, you come up with an agreement to let the people know if they can opt in or out. Now, while they're doing this with software, the device of the phone itself is constantly transmitting, and you own the satellites. What was Washington, D.C. all about? So that everybody would focus on the software and not the actual device. When was the last time you heard anybody go to Washington because Samsung cell phones have their camera on the back and the front? You never heard that before, have you? Nobody goes up there, well, they got a camera on the front and the back at the same time. We want that gone because one of them could be on and you wouldn't notice. No. Remember I said, if you're the richest person in the world, you can work both sides of the fence. How's the other side happen? They work through your children. Let me explain this. So if you want to surveil your own family members, you need devices to do that. But how do you get this stuff where nobody sees it? I'll show you how. You appeal to the children. Imagine the guy that wanted a camera on a phone. Why is a camera on the phone? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard of in my life. Who honestly put the camera on the phone? Let me tell you how it works. You start developing things that appeal to children. Why? Because parents will do anything to shut their children up. That's why. They're already tired from working and everything else. And so normally parents will buy something to keep the child occupied. All a kid has to say is, I'm bored. My friend has one of these. Why can't I have one? I'm bored. And so you get one of those things for the kid to shut them up. Now, as the kids buy this, that provides money for a company to go in R&D and make more things, and then all of a sudden, somebody looks at the kid's device and says, hey, that's pretty neat. I wonder if I can use that for this. And then it goes straight to the adults, and then you have serious people, serious R&D folks who are developing things, and the technology gets out of hand, but now you can surveil all things. But you want to find out where your family members are at all times without telling them. Remember, whatever you tell your family, they're going to tell somebody else. And so it is imperative you're going to think that they absolutely do not know that you're really tracking them. You may even start rumors. You may get on the internet and be your own counterintelligence. You'll keep the software thing going for so long, no one will look at the device. So now you have a way to do this. Now you can surveil your family as a consequence. Other companies can surveil everybody else. So now you can surveil, right? Now you have accountability of your family. Now, as you build in secret, as this thing is being built in 3 years, and you know where your family members are, what's the next step? Because first, you understand many people are going to die. Number two, you build that underground facility and you initiate experiments to replicate the surface of the earth underground, right? So you have physicists that do this. Then you have to have secrecy, right? Because you don't want everybody to find out about what type materials that you're putting down there and everything else. They may suspect you're building something large. And so you create R&D companies all across the place or begin to feed R&D companies everywhere. Now you have to surveil and you have accountability of your family. So what's the next step? Do you just sit there? Do they just sit there and wait? No, that's not what they do. They don't sit there and wait. Now you have to deal with the aftermath. And you also have to condition your family members. Two things together. Number 6, you have to deal with the aftermath. What is that? What is the aftermath? That's when everybody, right? Everybody goes underground. They may not even know why. But when they get underground, you can disclose the truth. But in the aftermath of going underground, they may be shocked learning that they can't come back to the surface for a year and a half or up to 3 years. Because you never told them that why things were built the way they were. And so it's going to be a type of a shock when they get down there. How do you deal with that? You subconsciously program them with exact scenarios. Well, how do you do that? You go to Hollywood. You begin to feed the aftermath events in stories and everything else. And you have these producers really believe in your story, and so they can make a movie adding pieces here and adding pieces there. Now remember, the only thing you want them to do is to be able to deal with the aftermath, with the shock that you have to go underground. You're going to be stuck there for 3 years, and that after 3 years you're going to have to deal with the aftermath of Earth. So how do you get them subconsciously programmed to handle that, right? Because if that happens, people normally, when they lose their mind or have a mental breakdown, that means they have no visual reference in memory to relate to what's going on. So they give you a reference point. That's called movies. So in fact, when you find yourself in a situation and you have seen a movie close to that situation, your mind goes straight to the movie. Did you know that? Your mind goes straight to the movie. So they give you a reaction, and they put it in story after story after story. Have you guys noticed, while everybody's saying that E.T. is coming in all these movies about aliens, very few people ever took note of the aftermath scenario. That is exactly the same in all of them. First, the shock. How do you deal with that? Then, the aftermath of what happened to the people. How do you live in a world that's been torn up? How do you continue on? And so after these movies, what do they show? The sun coming up. They always show the sun. They always show somebody walking off. The aliens are defeated, which means you're going to live again. They always show this thing over and over and over again. They do this with other type movies, monster movies, but it's the exact same thing. You'll see the sun rising. You'll see people walking off. In other words, they're telling you it's not a hopeless thing. So that when the people get down there, they have a reference point of these movies, and they'll encourage one another. They'll do so in truth. They do it all the time. Have you noticed that with the movies? They always have these weird type of endings, don't they? It's almost like they cut the movie off and you have this ending. There is a document just about subconscious programming that was published in 52, I believe it was, 1952. It continued throughout the years, and various companies dealt with this. But they know these two things, and let me explain this. If you introduce a visual reference point by way of television, your computer, anything else, if you visually immerse yourself into any program, the story and the images become a reference point subconsciously. Which means if you ever find yourself in that scenario and you have seen that visual reference point over and over again, you will mimic and begin to reproduce what you saw. I'll tell you what's funny. You ready? You ready for this? I'm going to have a conversation. I wish I could see you guys. I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to say a few things. I'm going to show you something. And I want you guys to give me an answer. Okay, you ready? I'm going to say a few things. How many of you love to go to the beach and you sit back, right? You just sit back on the beach, take in nature, feeling the heat and the hot sun and everything else, and just sit with a cold, like a cold drink of water, tea or something like that, and just really enjoy yourself. Isn't that a beautiful scene? Isn't that a beautiful scene? Right? Beautiful scene. And that's a movie scene. And let me show you how it works. I've heard that very thing from many people. I just want to go to the beach and lean back, right? And feel and put my feet in the sand and have a cold drink under a tree. And then you ask them, have you ever been to the beach? Well, no. Where did you get that idea from? Well, that's my idea. No, it isn't. Where did you see that from? Well, that's just what I want to do. No, where did you see it from? I saw it on a commercial. I saw it in a movie. How about Lifetime TV? Don't act like you don't watch it. All those scenarios in Lifetime. And women out there, and men, will look at those scenarios, and then they'll look at the people in their homes and say, well, now, I'm going to do what she did. And they should do so-and-so. Women will look at a movie and then look at their husbands and say in their minds, well, he should treat me better. But why? Because a movie suggested better treatment. Isn't that funny? So you have a visual reference point. And guess what? You copy everything. You mimic things in your life. I've seen people do that with information all the time. There is no new information. It's just copied information. No one has anything original. It's so funny. Yet people fight tooth and nail like their information is original. Where'd they get that from? They got it from somebody else. Did you ever try to prove it? No, I trust the character of the other person. One person said, I can prove it. How are you going to prove what you just said? I have the document right here. That does not prove it. So then prove it. Well, they'll say the document does prove it. Where'd you get the document from? Well, I got it from a friend who got it from the government. So you got a third-hand document that proves something? No. So what I'm telling you is this. Subconscious programming gives you a reference point, a visual reference point. And when it's embedded into your head by you seeing that same thing over and over again, it becomes a natural response in that specific scenario. If you inundate the populace with that, the people you love the most are also going to be inundated with it. So that when they go down there, that shock and awe is manageable. Because imagine bringing your family members into a place they never knew about, and you say, you're going to have to be here for 3.5 years. They may freak out on you. You don't know how they're going to respond. So you have to make sure they're programmed properly, so they have a reference point. And then they will begin to talk to one another. Behavioral scientists, what country was that? They call them magicians of the mind. Behavioral scientists are. They study behavior so much that now they have charts of what a person will do based upon this. Kind of like Proverbs. Kind of like Proverbs. So you have those. You have to deal with the aftermath, both of your own family members and of the stragglers, the people that made it outside. You have to deal with that. Now, when I come back, we're going to go over the final ones, and I'm going to see if you can actually capture this scenario. But because, in fact, well, just maybe, this scenario could have been underway for a while. Because they are really convinced. Could be. I'm going to be back in just a moment, folks. Just a moment. So I can introduce you to something called chemtrails. Just for a moment. See, that wasn't long at all. That wasn't long at all. Where were we? We were talking about dealing with the aftermath. So naturally, when they're down there, they have to wait it out. And you have to be conditioned to do that. And it's very easy. You know what a motivator, guys, is? If you're in a tough spot, I used to do this when in the early days of training. I was comforted by people who could do the unbelievable, which allowed me to see that one day I could do it also. Because one day I thought it impossible to achieve certain things, but it's something when you see somebody do something, you know you can do it too. You'll say, I can do that thing. If you see someone do something, you will say, I can do that too. I can do it too. And so what they normally do, you have folks who are trained. Now, how do you train someone to live underground, for an example, to the rest? How do you do that? The only other thing you can do, and if you were a multi-billionaire, the only thing that's available without going underground is to go in space. Is to go in space. So to test people living underground, other than having the absence of natural sunlight in the way the air is to study folks in space. You know what? Most of the equipment in the earlier missions going into space was medical equipment and scientific experimentation dealing with radio waves, dealing with life forms in a zero-G environment, but with a lot of pressure. See, they have pressure chambers out there where they can mess with pressure. And it should be known to everybody that they have been testing plants under high pressure. High pressure. They've tested human beings under high pressure. But why? Because if you're in a box, right? If you're in a container under the earth, there are toxins under the earth. How do you keep the toxins out of your structure? You make sure that the pressure inside the structure is higher than the pressure outside the structure. That's how you do it. You have to pressurize the internal structure. So no air, no fumes, no anything goes in the structure. But it will always go outside. So you have to increase that pressure on the inside. But the only way to be sure of what can live and how people operate in that type of environment is to test those folks in space at very high altitudes. Because that same pressurized environment has to be replicated underground, because if you don't, liquids may seep in and everything else, right? But if the inside is pressurized, even water won't come in. If it's sealed right, even if there were a small crack, if the pressure on the inside is higher than the outside, a small crack will not allow anything to come in. Rather, the atmosphere inside will be pumped through that crack outside, effectively acting as a secondary seal to that hole, to that vessel, to that room, to that structure. Do you guys understand where I'm coming from? So then you would have to test folks in a pressurized environment. You would have to test whatever would be down there. You'd have to test it. That includes vaccines, viruses, all plant life, animals, what the digestive system is like. When you test such a thing, you know, how food operates and all this, that, and the other, you would really have to do that. You test that in that pressurized environment, right? So the only place to really get away with that and to get people to train at a maximum potential by way of fear is space. To work out all the problems, you'd have to do that in space, because if you can live and occupy space and you can engineer everything to operate out there, you can use that same engineering practice in the earth in a pressurized system. Right? Are you guys with me so far? Now, if you were the richest person on earth, you'd be a very, very busy person. But you know what's so funny is people have talked about rumors of this forever, for a long time. There's been evidence of underground facilities for a long time. 51 have been decommissioned. And people can now go in those underground facilities. One has been turned into a mall. And it's very beautiful. Big, huge. The abandoned caverns. Houses sitting underground in huge caverns. Amazing, I tell you. Amazing. So anyway, you'd have to do that and test up ground. So after all this is taken care of, which would likely take you a very long time, you would refine and double-check everything you did the first time. You would still have to run campaigns to initiate experimentation. You would still have to hide the materials within public companies. You would still have to subconsciously get people prepared, though your family members. You would still have to keep track of your family members. And you would have to inform them so they would have the right information How do you do that? That's another matter. So now this whole scenario that I just gave you, right? Wouldn't that be one of the likely, aren't these scenarios? They seem like that's what people have been doing for at least 30, 40 years. Because if you took this on a larger scale, it would take you 30, 40, 50 years to accomplish this. It'd take you a long time to accomplish this. Wouldn't it? A very long time. And if it took that long to do this, you would perfect the craft of disinformation. See, if you go after someone who's spreading, who has information, classified information on something or something very delicate, right? You would just simply do what everybody else does. You would act as one who opposes the information, says, oh, that's garbage, and then you would leave everything alone. Because once you say something is garbage, other people pick up your cause. You just need to plant the seed. And the other people, because of their pride, they pick up the story and they begin to find facts behind something that never existed in the first place. Isn't it funny? And then they convince everybody else it's real, thus you have perfected your craft in doing so. They do this all the time. Correct? In fact, this scenario could be taking place. Do you guys see that? It's not complicated, is it? But it is a different way of thinking. Now we're going to go to chemtrails. Right? Most people think chemtrails, they really do. And we all know there are weather modification experiments taking place from Canada to Mexico. We all know this. Correct? It's a known fact. A known fact. Weather modification experiments. Here's my problem with that. If you can find the information anywhere and it's been declassified, how can it possibly be what they're really doing? How can that be the point of what they're really doing? Now, most people say, well, they're poisoning everybody. No, they're not. No, they're trying to save their lives. I gave you this scenario because it gives you insight into people who really try to save their own lives. They're not going to poison stuff long term. They would be poisoned. They're not going to go underground and live under there forever. They're not going to do that. They're going to go to places of safety. This is told in prophecy. But they're going to come topside after it's all done. That's their plan. They're not going to kill themselves. If you start poisoning everything, you could really mess up the delicate balance of nature itself, and then no one would be able to come topside. Correct? So certain things they won't initiate. Let's go to chemtrails. Chemtrails, people began to notice them a long time ago. Really, back in the 80s, the subject really took off. But let me give you this story. Long time ago, during World War II, and parts of World War I, when they first began to fly, they ran into a problem of trying to hide their airplanes. They did. They ran into a problem. And so one day, they began some experiments to hide aircraft and ships. And the way they did this was they would cause a fog bank to form. Right? So they had a bunch of people with scientists and everything else trying to cause or to create a fog bank. So no one could see through that fog bank. Now remember, this is days prior to the radar type that we use today. So they wanted to hide things by sight. And then they experimented with this and found out, yes, we can do it with a special grade of releasing aerosols and things of that nature. We can make fog. But one day they did this, right? And the fog went into Germany. And when it went into Germany, it gave the Allies an advantage because the fog hid the number of troops that was surrounding a specific place. And they said, wow, this works. This is awesome. In fact, it was Patton who picked up on this. Anyway, as time went on, that was noted. So ever since that time, they began to work with weather modification equipment. And what they were after was to use weather modification against their enemies. Because even if you knew where your enemy was, your enemy knows where you are too. Even if you do that, you're going to have people face to face. But if you could freeze the area, heat the area up, or hide it within freak storms would come and hit that area, how awesome would that be? So, of course, yes, they exercised these things, and they had experiments. They do to this day. But listen, when that took place, they found something else out about water. When they dropped those aerosols, it had tiny little metal fragments in the solution. Now, listen to what happened. During the advent of radar, when it finally kicked off, when they did this experiment, they found out it was reflecting the radar back onto itself, giving false readings. They said, oh, wow, we have a deterrent against radar. What is it? All you have to do is make sure that metal fragments are in the rain. So they began to do this over and over and over again until they perfected it. But they didn't know the effects that those small metallic particles would have on people. Right? They continue to do this. And then with the new radar systems, they said, wait a minute, if it can reflect the radar back onto itself, what if we could put it higher, right, where it would lay flat, not vertical, but horizontal? And what we could do is use that bouncing technique to see a landmass far away. In other words, you beam something up to a reflective plate in the air, and it goes down on the target, which is way over on the opposite side of the earth, and then it comes back the same direction. You capture the information now without a satellite. You can see what's going on all over the world. They said, what if we can do that? And so thus, guess what? They said, we need a big transmitter for this. In New York, they had a big transmitter. It was not big enough. Those were the days HAARP was born. I call those the innocent days, because they wanted a big transmitter. And then they ran multiple programs from HAARP. The high altitude experimentation to stop spy equipment from coming over the U.S. Think about this. In Area 51, it was a tasking job. Let me tell you what happened in the Cold War at Area 51 before people knew really what it was about, before it really got on the map. Let's go back before that. And what would happen was every single time something was outside, they would cover it with a very special covering, so that when a satellite or a Russian satellite or anybody looked down on Area 51, it was a very special material that would reflect back a weird type aircraft or something else, so that the Soviets could never see exactly what was on the ground. And so they had these practices in Area 51 that they would only bring things out at a certain time of the day when they could verify that Soviet satellites were not out there. Believe me, it's done like clockwork. You bring it out, then you bring it back in. They began to do all these things to fool the Soviets, so the Soviets couldn't see what was down there. Then after that, more other things began. But they ran out of room quickly, thus establishing an entirely different test area for certain things. Anyway, that was also part of HAARP. Then they found out about logic. Now hear me close. Because they said, wait a minute, if a radar can see what's on the surface of the earth, is there any other way we could actually take a real-time snapshot of any area on the face of the earth? Not a photograph. Forget a photograph. They wanted to see details deep into the ground. How do you do that? Heat signatures. So then you had to work with infrared. But infrared is not well reflected unless you can control how it's reflected, dealing with the curvature of the earth, and it's set up to this day. If you were to put big aluminum sheets up in the sky, and you had them curve a little, you could effectively point an infrared beam that you were going to capture later. in front of you only by a few degrees, reflect it all the way through the earth, and it would show what's behind you. It really would. It would show what's behind you. But in order to do that, in order to get infrared to reflect properly, you would have to heat up the atmosphere, thicken the atmosphere. Well, how are you going to do that? You need cloud cover to do that. They want a cloud cover at specific levels, specific altitudes. Well, how in the world do you do that? You make them. You make those clouds. How do you make clouds? How do you do that? Did you guys know they have 12 new type of clouds this year? Do you know that? 12 new classifications of clouds. Do you guys know that? So anyway, HAARP heats up the stratosphere. Chemtrails are full of metallic. It's a metallic composition with some radiation. That it just so happens it perfectly reflects infrared. Perfectly. The materials on the periodic table of what's contained in chemtrails that people don't believe in reflects infrared perfectly. Now, just in case you don't believe in chemtrails, let me explain to you what I'm talking about. Have you ever seen an aircraft fly and it leaves a contrail and then it does not leave a contrail for about, 2 or 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden that contrail starts again? And then if you're lucky, you'll see an airplane come from a different direction. And right where the contrail of the first one ended, it picks up. And right where that first contrail, starts, the other plane cuts off. Then you'll see another plane traveling across that chemtrail. And it turns on in that specific location. And it leaves a shortened contrail. Then you see another one that leaves a shortened contrail, all in a concentrated area. Now, answer me this. How can contrails only show up in a certain area throughout the course of an entire day? How does that happen? How does that happen? Now, how would a person get away with this? How can those pilots sit up and do that and never be caught? Because they don't control it. Can I give you a small scenario? Suppose there was a program tied in with every single aircraft. So when they squawk, they have another identification number that a computer reads. Suppose that computer system is clicking a relay on and off that would cause spray or not cause spray. And because of the air traffic, they just simply wait on regular routes and then release it. So long as it's in in proximity, they can release everything. But the pilots are not doing it, personally, and they know nothing about the details of it. But they're carrying a payload they know nothing about. That will release when somebody else tells it to release. That way they leave everybody off the hook. You certainly wouldn't want to tell every single pilot. You may tell them they have exotic materials, but don't tell them what it's used for or anything else. No need to. You can control this thing from somewhere else. So they're flying innocently, right? Because in order for a person to be effective, they must have a clear conscience, or they're going to have a breakdown. How do you get away with that? You don't tell them everything. You just tell them they just signed for a very special payload that may or may not release into the sky. You don't tell them why. You don't tell them to keep pushing a button here and here, because a pilot, if they know that, they may release it over their own hometown and feel guilty by doing it and then spill the beans. They tried that before, and many people spilled the beans. So now in the computer age, in the age where we have computers and algorithms and everything else with very fast calculations, you take all the planes that fly over U.S. airspace and you control when it releases whatever chemical or not. That's how you do that. So it's not some mastermind plan of the FAA. It's an R&D company that controls the switches, the buttons to release or don't release. That's what it does. When they cut off and don't cut off, right? because there are laws in certain. Oh, and by the way, if you had with a contrail, it definitely comes from the engines. Some of these aircraft, they leave. Suppose it's a 2-engine aircraft. How can it leave 4 contrails? How can that happen? You see? Suppose it's a 4-engine aircraft. How can it leave a contrail slightly aft into the port side of that aircraft? You can't do that because the engine is nowhere near there. Nor is there any hatch you can open or anything else. And then you inspect the configuration of the aircraft and find out that something else was going on altogether. In other words, what I'm saying is the way they get away with something is keep that pilot innocent of a lot of things so that they can fly with a good conscience. So that something nobody knows about is actually controlling when it releases, when it doesn't. Now, why would anybody do this? For better effectiveness of the heating of the stratosphere. Why would anybody want to do that? To spread out certain materials in the atmosphere for high reflectivity. Now, during this, while this is implemented in this scenario, there would be side effects and there would be other advantages. What type of advantages? You could take an arid region of the world and cause rain. All you have to do is agitate the metallic particles left by contrails. They will begin to absorb water molecules to themselves, thus forming big cumulonimbus clouds. Normally you see stratus clouds at the end of the day after all these planes spray in certain areas. But you could definitely target that one area where these contrails are. You can agitate them. Remember, they work perfectly with infrared, which, by the way, is heat. And you could effectively cause a weather phenomenon just about anywhere. But you would also have perfect reflectivity of what's happening on the surface of the Earth without satellites. Now, you really don't think that our military and everybody else is that dumb to launch satellites knowing that somebody else can shoot them down so that if they are shot down, now the military can't see? No. There's a backup plan for every backup plan, just like the HAARP facility. There are 2 HAARP facilities. The public only goes to see one of the facilities from time to time, but there's another one side by side with it. There's so many HAARP facilities within the U.S., it's not funny. They've hidden some of them in these cavernous areas that you can only see from high altitudes. No plane can see them because it's restricted airspace. They must go around it. What would the benefits of seeing a reflectivity of infrared near real time all over the face of the Earth be? I'll tell you. You have a real-time moving map of all elements on the surface of the Earth. So you know where everything is all the time. All the time. With infrared, you can look right through the roof of a house down to a few hundred feet below the surface. Why? Because it's picking up heat. That's what it's picking up is heat. And it can tell the difference between hot and cold, even the exact temperature. Thus, you have early warning systems for missile launches and everything else. Radiation detection can be done through infrared, very special infrared, to look right down in the Earth to see how hot the materials are, and then when a geometric shape shows up in canisters, their side by, you can see uranium down there. See how that works? And that's the advantages of having global coverage without satellites. Have you ever noticed they're not really concerned about all these other countries having satellites that they're watching everybody? They argue about defense of these satellites, but they've not really, to the public's knowledge, really did anything about it. And that's something. Any heat source they can see, especially the human body. You know what that also means? That means 100% accountability of every living thing on the face of the Earth. See, with dogs and animals and things like that, well, you just need to know they're dogs and animals and things like that. But for human beings, you can see them moving, but you need to identify who the person is. Why is that? Just to plug in the holes in the computer program that can absolutely 100% do that. What would the side effect be? Geoengineering would be the side effect. And it will continue. Nobody's going to stop it because it is too well planned. Anyway, with those chemtrails, there are going to be side effects to every experiment, won't they? Not necessarily trying to kill everybody, nor poison the air or anything else. Why would they poison themselves? I've seen some high rollers die from cancer. They have a cure for cancer. Do you know that? I can't even talk about that because that does kind of get under my skin. You know why? Because the average person knows nothing about it. Some people do, but the average person doesn't. And so they let the average person suffer. Now, consequently, speaking about cancer, cancer is like a plague all over the earth. But why? Why are there so many cases of cancer? Anybody know why? Oh, see, there we go. I'll tell you what it includes. It includes the first scenario I gave you. It includes HAARP. It includes chemtrails. It includes CERN in a big way. That's what that includes. Now, all of us can agree of something. The sun was different when we were little. The skies were different when we were little. Everything is fuzzy now. Everything is fuzzy. There's a term that many of you who were here at the beginning may hear me say, and I've not uttered this in a while. Operation Heavy Cloud. Maybe you heard me say that. Operation Heavy Cloud. Maybe, just possibly. Maybe you heard me say that. Possibly. Anyway, there's a reason for all these things. Is man doing it on purpose? I don't give man that much credit. A lot of this is a consequence of experimentation. People out there, one thing that gets me about people who do research, some of you, now can I say this from a love perspective, because I do love you, is that some people, here's what they're really saying, that the government has perfected everything they're doing. And they can perfectly control the weather. And they can perfectly do this and perfectly do... I don't believe in that. Because every time somebody comes up and says, they're killing us, and people ought to wake up because they're killing us, what that implies is that the government is so flawless in how they're doing things that they fool the entire populace. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. I don't give man that much credit. You mean to tell me they're purposely doing something and they do it so well that nobody knows and they've been doing it all this time? That it can be perfectly hid, yet they never make mistakes? I don't believe that. Every major storm that hits, I hear the same thing. Oh, that was HAARP. You mean to tell me that they can perfectly modify the weather? I know that mankind has weaponized everything they can weaponize. I also know Kim Jong-un is scared to death. You guys don't know that, I do. Kim Jong-un is terrified. That'd be a Good Friday subject. He is scared to death. Why would Kim Jong-un be scared to death? I'm telling you now, he's scared to death. But why? Anyway, you get all this stuff going on. You have the consequence of what you call chemtrails going on. But you have a surveillance system so incredibly advanced. One description won't work, not accurately. I noticed also in the beast system, listen to this statement. The beast had a power to give life unto the image of the beast that mankind built. He gave life to it to the degree that it would be able to kill anyone that would not worship it or take the mark. How can an object that mankind built be able to discern if a person is loyal to it or not? How can that be? That would imply that this image of the beast, because they were put all over the place, has global access and knows people so well. But how? How can it kill someone anywhere they are that would not worship it and take the mark of the beast? How would it even know? Global surveillance and a computer system. That's how. Global surveillance with a computer system. Listen, I was never afraid of any one person looking at anything that I've ever typed, written, emailed, or anything else. But I knew about computers, how they can collect that information and pass it to an artificial intelligence system. And that AI system can utilize that data to forecast everything about us. Listen, it's so bad that there was a person that was talking, listen to me, she was talking about a dress. All in a place she was talking about a dress. All of a sudden, the phone rings while she's still shopping yet in another store, and guess what pops up? The same dress she was talking about that was found in no stores. It suggested the very dress she was talking about that she could not find in the stores. Do you understand? This happens every single day. Did a man or did some woman sit behind a computer and do that? No. An AI system did. That quick, that fast. Out of all the data in the world, this AI system captured that data, worked with it, and then proposed for the sake of shopping the same dress she spoke about. But remember, before that happens, it must hit a server. And billions of people are using that same server. So within seconds, it went through billions of people and then suggested something to her. Yeah, that's kind of frightening. Not only that, people are finding out more and more that the movies that are being suggested to them is so creepy because it's exactly what they want to see. Unless you know about having an untrackable footprint, which means you have to be unpredictable. Because an AI system can tag you as predictable. It will force you to do things and you don't even know. It will force you to think a certain way and you don't even know. Even if you don't have a computer, you're still going to be in the system. Even if you don't have a phone, you're still going to be in the system. It can cause society to act a certain way. It can take everything you do not like and associate it with a person and cause you to leave that person alone. It can work in situations like that billions of times per second with no problem. Trillions of times per second with no problem. That's almost like saying, well, how does Facebook really make money? You know, that question arose and it was so funny because they asked, they listen, at the White House, not the White House, but in Congress, they asked Mark Zuckerberg, they said, how does Facebook make money? His face looked a certain way. You know what he said? Advertising, of course. What makes Facebook worth so much? He said. How much is Facebook worth? Oh, it was so funny because these were questions he didn't want to answer. The main one by sitting congressman was, how does Facebook make its money? And you think about that. You don't pay for Facebook, do you? You don't pay for it. Lots of people use Facebook. Resources you couldn't believe. Servers you wouldn't believe to handle all those people. Then you have to have air conditioning systems to handle the cooling down of the servers. Nodes, which are computer stations sitting all over the place. Continuous cycle of programming, right? The life cycle of Facebook is on a continuous basis. There is no death to it. Who's paying for all that stuff, right? That's what Congress said. How do you make the money? And it was so funny how they looked. And they never really answered it. But if you thought in real terms, what does Facebook actually do? It collects information about your thoughts, about your will, about your intentions, about your heart, because you share every situation in every location in everything you're doing with Facebook. Thus, it has a psychological profile on you that's deadly accurate, because all you have to do is continue every single day when you interact with Facebook. By the way you type and what you speak about is going to convey your set of emotions to a machine. It's going to see how you act most consistently, and then a basis of your profile is grown from that. It knows you very well. It knows what you're inclined to go watch at the movies. It knows what you are inclined to eat at any given time of the day. Now, the image of the beast will be able to kill people that don't worship the beast. How can it pick and choose which ones? Because of all the information that's being collected today. Because of surveillance by machines, not by people, by machines on a continuous basis. That machine can know you better than anybody can. Just like you can hang around a person for 40 years and then begin to know who you're dealing with. Just like a husband and a wife, that couple can get together and one of them will say, I want, the other one will say, a salad. And that'll be exactly what both of them want. They can finish each other's sentences. But why? Because they have learned each other. Over a long duration of time spent together, you begin to predict what the other person wants before they actually get the whole thing out. So now machines are doing that. And it knows who's loyal and who is not. Isn't that something? Can you imagine that? But why though? Why is it so refined? I'll tell you why. Because we demand the toys. We demand upgrades. We demand a better user interface. Because we want, and we demand to be noticed by someone. So we share everything. You don't believe that? We demand it. You don't believe that, do you? Let somebody send you a text message and you don't answer for 2 days. What do you think the other person's going to feel like? They're going to say, that person doesn't like me anymore. They didn't contact me for 5 minutes. They hate me. They don't do this. So what am I saying, though? People demand an answer quickly. Do you know that? They demand it. If you send a text message, and somebody responds to you a day later, you're going to be upset. Why didn't you answer my text message? What do you mean? I did answer the text message. It took you forever. You don't care. Then they come up with all sorts of stuff. They demand you send an answer back right away. So what do you see? You go out into the world and everybody's looking down, aren't they? Everybody has their head down. I was wondering in prophecy too, could everybody hold hanging their head down be in prophecy? I did. I have a mind like that, I'm sorry. Because that's something just about everybody does. They walk the streets with their head down looking in a phone. Surely that has to be in prophecy somewhere. It is. It really is. Also, some people can't sleep at night because they feel they're going to miss something. I used to hear that in COT. People would have their phones cut off and everything else, and they say, oh, I just feel cut off from the world. I'm missing something. They're so happy when they get their technology back. Oh, they're so happy. I remember a person had a power outage. They were in COT. Oh, they were so frustrated for 2 days. On the third day, when the power came back, they were so excited. They said, oh, I'm so happy to see everyone. They just kept talking. But why? Because their power was turned back on. They were useless without their device. And something? What does that tell you? That the average ordinary individual, let's just say that the average person, their identity is held by their device. In other words, without the device, without a way to communicate, without an audience, they feel like nothing. Facebook makes them who they are. Social media makes them who they are. But without that, they feel like they're nothing. No good for anything. Such sadness, isn't it? My. That's social engineering at its best. It really is. Why would anybody do that and continue to do stuff like that? One, they're driven by not so good motives, but largely because they're perfecting machines that compile bits of information about everybody to come up with a model of the future. It's a predictive system. Let me give you an example. Suppose you want the people to like someone. Let's just suppose I wanted everybody in the Council of Time to like Bobby, who they don't know from Adam. You don't know Bobby, but Bobby is coming, and I want everyone to like Bobby before Bobby gets here. How in the world would I make that happen? I don't get to see any of you guys. I'm talking to you guys. I don't touch you or anything. How can I get you to actually like someone that you have no information about? How do we do that? Here's how it works. If I want you to like Bobby, I create a scenario from someone you know and someone you trust. So I go and find a person you trust, that all of you trust. I sit him in front of you. I create a scenario by which this individual that you do trust fails and betrays you. Once he fails and betrays you, all of a sudden the people who feel betrayed lose their trust of everybody because they're hurt. Every time a person is betrayed, they also get hurt because you're hurt. You really do have an outlook on everybody like that one person who did it. So you start going through life. Now remember, I'm trying to introduce you to Bobby. I want you to like Bobby. So I start picking out character flaws in the person you did search. And I make it known everything he did, but only those things he did that you don't like. And I begin to repeat those things in various ways. Now you have a lot of ammo against him. All of a sudden I bring in a figure who is nothing like the first figure. But instantly, he begins to give you what you were complaining about. It captures your attention because you'll say, the other guy didn't do this. This guy does. Hey, this guy might know what he's doing. And he does it not consistently every time. He does it in a way where it looks like he's struggling to do something just for you. Well, that sounds kind of familiar. So then you put the person in that everybody accepts first, and you cause that person to disappoint everybody. I did that so that you could embrace Bobby, who you have never met, know nothing about. So when I introduce Bobby, you're looking at him sideways, but instantly he begins to do what nobody else could do. And because of his effort, you begin to trust Bobby. That's how that works. You guys see how that works? That's how it works. These are keys to all preparations that have been underway for a long time. It would take a long time to get all these things done, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? A long time. And then guess what? When you know when it actually takes place, people get angry at those who never told them, but the truth is you have been told. And most people will respond just like they have seen in the movies and on video games. They are a predictive response. So that they can manage the populace and keep them away from those whose lives are going to be saved. The Bible says that they're going to hide themselves in the clefts of the rocks, in the dens of the mountains, in various other places, hiding. They're going to say, hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. That's what they're saying. So yes, they have places prepared. Absolutely. But now you see it would take a long time to get these things done. Now you also know that everything people name as nefarious may not be nefarious. You see? And that's something. Unfortunately, even if you knew this today, because of how the world is, you'd have a hard time believing it. The initiation of experiments dealing with sunlight and everything else, they're right in front of you. High pressure environments. You don't send everybody into a high pressure environment. You have people train in that environment and collect data until you replace the person who you collected data on to send an individual to live in that condition for a while so that, oh, nobody asked you. So when they come back, you hear that? Now, that was automation for you. How about that? You do that. That scared me to pieces, guys. You do that so that when they come back, they know about that high-pressure environment. And guess what? When they begin to instruct others, they feel good about it because now they're saving other people's lives. There was something I asked you guys a long time ago to remember, you know what? It's kind of good that I'm buffeted from time to time when people sow seeds of doubt. I think that's a good thing. You know, here's why. I never want anybody to take anything I say at face value. Take everything I say and everybody else says with 2 tractor trailers of salt. You ever heard that term? I want people to take it with 2 tractor trailer loads of salt. Do you know why? You know why? Because I would desire that a person will seek the Lord, to truly ask the Lord if they truly want to know. Lord, what do I need to know? Don't ask him what's going on here, what's going on there. Ask the Lord, what do you need to know? You know, I've never gone wrong doing that because I learned something. I never, ever want to know something that I don't need to know. I really don't want to know anything I don't need to know. But I do often ask the Lord, Lord, be merciful to me. Please tell me what I need to know. And I trust what comes back. I ask him to tell me what I need to know. Just tell me what I need to know. Because because of what I asked the Father, I know this one thing also. He is forever aware of your life and my life. He has determined the ending, and the victory is already assured. What you go through grows you. It will not defeat you, it's going to grow you. Situations and circumstances you behold, you must behold. Every circumstance and situation you go through, you must go through, or you would not go through them. That's your Father's communication to all of us. Now, when I come back, I want to talk about a little bit, we're going to talk about a small bit of volcanism. We can do that when I come back. Hang in there, folks. I'll be back here in a few moments. I want you guys to hang in there, and we will discuss a little bit of volcanism. You guys hang in there. I'll be right back. You guys have to help me out on the volume because I'm unsure how this is working. I'm unsure how this is working. So hopefully it's, I needed to get to this place. I'm going to attempt to pull up the chat room because I can't see it and I'd like to interact, or this would be a one-sided conversation. Hopefully, while I'm figuring this out, guys, I'm going to multitask, but you can see that one reason I'm talking about this is that if you begin to spend your lifetime investigating the doings of somebody else, you live a fruitless lifestyle. You really do. It is very fruitless when you begin to, and I know that I'm not saying that offensively to disregard, because people do good work out there, right? But it's just that we have a different calling. We really do have a different calling. And if we spent our lives trying to find out about somebody else's preparations just so that we could be right about those preparations, well, that wouldn't be very good, correct? That would be a waste of time filled with anger and make for a good topic for a show, but not in fact, because I always think in these terms, folks. If something horrific is coming, why would you have a show to entertain people about it? I mean, wouldn't you want them to also be safe, right? Why would you turn it into some sensationalist topic and then say, ooh, well, that guy knows all of what's going to kill us? I mean, what's that have to do with anything? And the second thing is that these things have been going on for a long, long time. It's not like any one of us can go up and change it. Now, we can change it one person at a time, but then everybody, what is the point of certain things? Here's what I'm saying. There was a person, there's the argument among the church about round earth and square earth. Okay, so let's just say everybody proved that the earth was round. What good is that? Honestly. What good is that? Or let's just say it was proven that the earth was flat. What good is that? We're still going to have the same struggles. We're still going to have the same devil. We're still going to have the same obstacles to overcome. What good is that? And so some of these subjects are more of a distraction than anything else. Right? Aren't they? A great distraction. Right? Isn't that funny? When they could have spent their time in deep meditation and thought with the Lord, saying, Lord, what can I do for somebody else? If I'm alive in this time, what can I do? What can I do, Lord Jesus, to complement your gospel? I think to a large degree people have lost the focus. I will talk about that. What focus am I talking about? Jesus came and established a work in this world. Correct? How many people do you know that will ask the Lord, what can I do, Lord, for you in this earth, because this is your work, what can I do? But that's not what people are doing. You know what they're saying? This is where doctrinal issues come up. You can only argue about doctrine and get all offended if you think that you own the gospel. Think about that. They're not doing the work. Not one of us is doing anything for the Lord if we get upset because somebody doesn't agree with us. They're doing it for themselves. But how many people pray and say, Lord, what can I do for you? Because it's your gospel in the earth. Lord, what can I do for your gospel in the earth? How can I assist you, Lord, in your work in the earth? Because it's not our work, it's his work. See, this has been lost, hasn't it? And then you have people that pop up that think they own the gospel of Jesus Christ. They try to be experts to tell everybody else they're wrong, but they will not tell everybody else where they're right. I'm not one of those people who points out everything you do wrong. You know what I say? I will point out everything that you do right, and I will encourage that one right thing. Isn't that what Jesus did? He only told the Pharisees and everybody else who they were when they challenged him and did not believe, and were standing in front of Christ, challenging him in front of everybody else to see what he would say. That's why he said the things he said around them. Otherwise, he was healing people. He was lifting people up. He was bringing people together. But what do people do these days? They think they own the gospel. And I tell you the truth, that's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's their own gospel. The Bible says a fool is right in his own mind, and you cannot argue with a fool. You know what? When it comes to the Lord's gospel, he's right. I'm wrong. All I can do is assist. I don't own it. I can't train somebody in something that Jesus trains us all in. I'm not raising anybody. Jesus is raising us. Jesus is. You see that? And then most people think they own the gospel. Well, he's not doing it right. You have to be saved this way, not that way. You know what they're doing? They act like Jesus doesn't even exist. Like they have become Jesus in the earth. Oh, there was a prophecy about that. They challenge people on how they believe. Well, you don't believe this way, so you're no good. That's ridiculous stuff we've lost. In a large degree, a lot of people have lost focus. When you're doing the work of Christ, it should only be authenticity and love that comes from one to all. Right? Lord have mercy. Isn't that something? But you have these folks out there, they like to dictate. You know what I call that? Part of the spirit of control. They control how people are saved. They try to anyway. And if you don't do it their way, they're done with you. They do. Well, I'm done with that person. Why? Because that's not what you do. And that person's going to end up being nothing. Why? Because that's not what you do. And then you ask the person, well, how do you do it? Well, you have to follow the Bible. Well, isn't that what the person was doing? Yeah, but they're following the wrong Bible. So there's no winners in that situation either. This same spirit's in the earth. This spirit in the earth is trying to control how people function and operate, and it begins with those who are grumpy. The grumpy ones, always dissatisfied with somebody else's topic, choice, or anything else. I like to celebrate what people do for the Lord. See, I already know people are going to stumble. That's why I don't even look at somebody who's stumbling. I'll always lend my hand to say, hey, can I help you? But it's up to them to say yes or no. I never intrude in somebody's life and say, let me help you. I don't do that. I will ask. Jesus did too. He said, will thou be made whole? Didn't he? Imagine that. The Son of the living God never forced any of a healing upon anybody. You know what he said? Will you be made whole? Isn't that what he said? Isn't that something? And what do? We come up with weird stuff. Well, I'm supposed to do this and that to that person. No. And here's the funny part. Listen to me. Those people who operate this way, nobody wants to hear what they have to say. I wonder why. It's not because they're teaching the gospel, it's because they're mean. Who wants to listen to a message of love from a mean person? Imagine that one. That doesn't work out too good. How can you be hateful giving a message of love? Is not the gospel of peace? Yes, it is. So then, how can somebody who's wrathful and grumpy and mean carry the gospel of peace everywhere they go? That doesn't work out too well, does it? Well, it's not going to work. Oh, man. You see how we get wrapped up in things, changing the entire paradigm within our own minds, living in our own world, and then the same person sits back and says, well, I'm glad I know Christ. I know everybody else doesn't. Really? Isn't that funny? This control mechanism. You know, the world does that all the time. They control the masses through weird things. And that same spirit's in it's in the church. Hey, I have an idea. Let us break away from all that. That joy may enter into our lives again. Have you guys noticed that when you're around certain people that are joyful and very forgiving, listen, they're very forgiving. There are no restrictions upon you. You can be exactly who you are and feel accepted. But when you're around individuals who like to control things, you feel very burdened and restricted in everything that you do. You're on pins and needles. But when you're around someone who is very forgiving, and they're not interested in your flaws, they're interested in what you do right, there's lots of healing also in the atmosphere. Have you noticed that? Isn't that something? Where forgiveness abounds, healing is there. Isn't that beautiful? But you get around some folks who point out everything that you do wrong, and nobody wants to be around a person like that. See, the problem with that is this. If the Lord put something within you, which he did, but you're trying to make people hear you, you're going to drive people away. They're not going to hear a word you have to say. Therefore, what you have inside of you is no good for nothing. But if you extend an arm by way of your life, by way of things you say, by way of what you do in love, because we can all discern when somebody, listen, most people like to discern when somebody's hiding something or doing wrong. Let me challenge you to do this. Discern when somebody is truly angry, upset, and wrathful, but they're trying to act nice. Those are the phony balonies. That's the truth. Those are phony people. And you can discern that. You can always tell when a person is raging internally. Can't you? Everyone can discern that. The Lord didn't send us here to look at everybody's flaws and name them. Right? But we can see those who are full of hatred and rage and anger, and they like revenge. You can discern that all the time. And they try to be nice. That's why they have outbursts, because they can't maintain it. You see, a person who is truly free, who is truly loving and everything else, why would they blow their top? There's no build-up. They're not going to blow their top. Let love come out of them. But if you have a person holding in that rage, that anger, that unforgiveness, one day it's going to go poof and it comes out. Why does it come out? Because it was in them. See, we've got to discern these things so we know who to pray for and what to pray for. That's why people have blowouts in the first place. They get filled up full of this foul stuff, and then one day it pops out. And they direct it towards whoever they don't like at the time. But a person who is free of those things, how can it build up? It won't build up, will it? No, it won't build up, because there's nothing to build up unless it be love. Wouldn't that be nice if you could fill up in love and then one day that love overflows? Boy, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be beautiful? So what does that tell you? That tells you that a lot of people are seething pots full of things that when they come out, they're going to hurt somebody with it. And it should have never been in them in the first place. But the problem is, it's in the ingredients. You know that? If you keep adding things to the ingredients, and you're putting the top on something that's boiling, one day you can't hold back the pressure. And if I were you, I'd change the ingredients. See, when you're filled up with the Lord, the ingredients are good. You're not going to burst out in some angry moment that reaches the top and say, I just had to get that off my chest. You know, I can discern that too often when somebody, I'm going to use me because I can't use anybody else. There are people that hate me to the core, and they're too chicken to admit it. Now listen what happens. They boil up and boil up and boil up, and everything I say becomes an offense to them, right? That's what they do. They boil up. They hear me talking. They hear the flaws. They point out every flaw they can find. They keep building up and building up and building up. Until one day they pop. And when they pop, they can't help themselves. They keep coming back and they build up more. They're angry. They don't like me, but they keep coming back to get angrier and angrier and angrier. Traitors of love itself, because they always have an excuse to part company with someone. Somebody always did them wrong. They're always running. They never stay still. They're pointing the finger at somebody all the days of their life. And they don't even know that they're loved deeply. And if they die in that state, they're deceiving no one but themselves. Especially when a person has fought for them and they don't even know it. Fought for their reputation. Took up for them and their stuff and their things. That's happening in the body of Christ from the top to the bottom. Hateful people like a hateful bird. They have a problem with everything. Once they don't like you, everything you say is an offense. Hate. I don't do good with hate. I don't like hate to operate anywhere near me. Therefore, the Father allows me to see it. He also allows me to see folly, phonyism, fakeism. I can tell when a person does not mean what they say. I can see people when they bait others. I can see a person chat and know they're drunk. Gypsy, not serious about the conversation, trying to take out the frustration on everybody else. All these things in the body of Christ. But let me tell you what not to do. Don't sit there and dwell on it from day to day and say, well, this makes me so sad inside. You have a work to do for those who are alive. Jesus said, God is a God of the living, not the dead. Now, if a person is acting like that, don't sit up and waste your whole day thinking how you can bring them back. No, you pray that Jesus bring them back if you love them. But you've got to move on to the ones who are waiting to hear from you. There are folks out there that love you, folks that will love you in the future. You have a work to do in your life. See, if you're not careful, these things will be used as a tactic to slow you down or stop you. Do you know that? They can stop you. Have you ever had a person that something is always wrong in their lives? Now listen to this scenario. They call you, of all people, up on the phone to tell you everything that's wrong. By the time you're done talking to them, you're so down and depressed and you don't know where you are and everything else. You pray for the person and everything else. They come back the next day, they're worse than the state before. They have no healing, no progress, no anything. Everything within them is the real doom and gloom. They don't speak life at all. They always speak death. There's no promise in them or anything else. And as soon as you give them the advice, they don't want it because they never take it. But they keep coming back to you. See, if you're not careful, these people will embed themselves in your lives. They're not looking to change. They're looking to vent. They want you to be in the same place that they are. So they say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And they don't realize they're saying the same bad, negative story over and again. I mean, they just take the oxygen right out of the air. Oxygen thieves. And they weigh you down. Now, you may not feel it at first, but what happens is if you go through days of this and you keep it, it wears on you. Why? Because it's a natural response of us. out of love to try and to help somebody else. So you're going to ponder everything that somebody tells you when they're in trouble. And you want them to be fixed, right? And you'll ponder fixing them. But they don't want to be corrected, fixed, or anything else. I parted company with a person like that. I just said, Jim, I said, listen, when you need my help, please come to me. But I do not discuss those things that are in the grave. Your yesterdays are gone. You only have today. And they didn't want to talk to me because I would not talk about the past. Because I wouldn't talk about the past. And to sit beside them where they start blaming people, because I don't like that. If I'm in a conversation and someone starts pointing fingers at other folks, I will hang up. I'll do it rudely. I do not entertain conversations about other people. I'll hang up on people in a heartbeat. Now that you can call that bad all day, but I do warn people, I do not discuss other folks. Not going to do it. But you'd be men. I think there's a lot of men who are terrible. They gossip. Too many men gossip. They're telling on each other. They love to tell a thing. Busybodies. I'm talking about the men. What is a man doing? Gossiping in the first place. I'm talking about the men. Not just any man, but seasoned men gossiping about somebody else. That's a shame, isn't it? That's a shameful thing. And you know what that's called? Cowardice. If I had something to say about someone, I'm going to tell them face to face. I'm not going to tell some other party of my dislikes of you. I'm going to tell you. It's nobody else's business. But now you have more men gossiping than women. It is unusual. Boy, it's unusual. And it's hardly like, and nobody has honor anymore. They don't honor one another. They don't. For who they are, for who God made them. They won't honor it. If they can't control it, they're not going to have it. You know what? All these things in the house of God we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. But I'm going to tell you again, it's not yours. Don't you carry that stuff around. Understand it happens, but it's not yours to carry around. Yes, it's going to happen. Yes, it's happening right now, but we've got to move forward. Can you imagine imagine a volcano is about to erupt in 5 minutes? Somebody's standing beside you, and they start going into their past, and they want to tell you that, and they keep telling you, hold on. I'm going to tell you about this. Hold on, I'm going to tell you about this. The volcano erupts. You die with them. That's what the past does for you. Right? You see? What will that yield in your life? What will it yield? It slows you down. It causes people to be depressed and down, and everything is negative. Doom and gloom is not in what you say, but in how you live your life. And there are some people who live in a perpetual darkness. They don't know joy. So they only speak of what they know, which is death, destruction, darkness. Everything is wrong, nothing is right. We are Christians. Jesus did not tell us everything that was wrong with us. He told us who we could be in him. I noticed that in the Word of God. He encouraged us. He kept telling us we could do it. Just believe in him. He kept telling us this and telling us this and telling us this. But are we taking his advice? In most cases, we do sometimes. But we have to break these habits of the old man that are still in our lives. And we're running out of time. Those people in Hawaii ran out of time. Northern California is on my heart deeply. I don't know if they'll run out of time or not. But I'll tell you this, everything is heating up underneath the crust of the earth. I mean, there are places where there was no caldera. And through all of the mining we've done over many years, magma is reaching some of the mines. It's igniting the coal reserves. Gas taps are near them and everything. That the magma is on the move. The magma is on the move. And what are people doing? They're sidetracked. They're still complaining about Donald Trump. How long are we going to play that game? You know what though? I shared with you guys what they're actually doing and what they actually believe. They're preparing for the Bible. The Bible. The Bible. The Bible foretells us. It tells us in prophecy that they're going to hide in their dens, in the clefts of the rock. It tells us what they're going to do. The Bible informs us there's going to be an image of the beast, and that it's going to kill people who won't worship it. Kill them dead at 4 o'clock, those who won't take the mark of the beast either, which means it has to know everything that's going on with everybody. The Bible shares with us all these things that are going to happen. It says iniquity is going to abound. And we are in a time, it says earthquakes and floods in diverse places. Diverse means different places. Earthquakes and floods in different places. In another part it says blood, fire, and vapor of smoke. In another part it says, it uses the word pillars of smoke. Pillars of smoke. And they have 12 new classifications of clouds due to man-made things. Or they're covering up everything. Because to control something, all you have to do is name it. Oh, but I want to tell you guys something interesting. Can I do that? Something you may like. I can't talk too much about these subjects, but I'm going to talk to you about something that happened a long time ago. There is some equipment I was made aware of. A few of us were. Long time ago. And this has to do with Nikola Tesla. Anyway, there was a statement written by a very famous scientist who was one of the founding individuals concerning AC power, right? And he said, to harness the unseen energy, right, is the difference between two potentials. They call that the ether. You guys ever heard of that? I think Tesla was obsessed with the ether, which is an explanation for an unknown source of power, right? But now listen, they actually built devices that would harness the two different potentials. If you harness two different potentials of the same force, right? If you know those two different potentials, you can harness the power of it. And so what they did was, they had a set of experiments. Let me share these experiments. One of them blows me away even to this day. In fact, the demonstration of this experiment is utilized so that people can understand that this unseen force is real. Now, you can take this device, right? It's not a big device, pretty small device, that utilizes a negative potential of something and a positive potential of something. Harness the power of it, but you're not going to keep it, you're going to release it. So in essence, what it does is it's almost like a frequency. But let me give you this. They set this thing in the middle of nowhere in White Sands. They set this thing in White Sands. Well, this thing does not run off electricity. Now listen to me about this. It doesn't run from electricity, like there's no power generation to it, right? It does cause a resonance. It does. Here's what happened. First, they began to see rain in that area alone. That area where it was. Then, as the rains kept coming, somehow pollen and spores and everything else was attracted to this spot. Somehow, plant life began to flourish in this one area. This place had rocks and things in it. Right? Listen, and after 2 years, the rocks changed. In other words, the texture of the rocks began to change. They were all the same. Like something came and began to etch a certain pattern in the rocks. The insects there were quite large. The plants were quite large and vibrant and brilliant and beautiful. And do you know this one spot is fertile to this very day? But it began a long time ago. Nikola Tesla was working with frequencies. AC voltage is nothing but a frequency. Now we know that if you change the frequency or the vibration of DNA, you can distort the instructions of DNA. We know that if through an external transmission of about 2.4 gigahertz, you can obstruct the chemical transference of that DNA information from one cell to the other, you can totally obstruct it, therefore resulting in deformities. People have health problems later on, this, that, and the other. But also, we know that if that is lifted and a different frequency is introduced into the DNA, cancer is cured within about 5 days. Because all the cells, listen, cancer is a human cell which is mutated that refuses to send the shutoff signal. It won't respond to the shutoff signal. When they change the frequency over the course of 3 days, all the cancer shuts itself off and it dies. See, when a cell is damaged and the DNA is damaged, what it normally does is it shuts off its own life supply, or the body will send a signal out to kill all mutated cells, and the cells are obedient and they shut themselves down, and that's it. Cancer won't do that. It ignores the shutdown command and it keeps going. That's why it's cancerous. Restoration of a specific frequency, put back in order, defeats cancer quickly, effectively, without radiation or anything else. Why? Because it accepts the shutdown signal. In fact, all the processes of the body, high blood pressure, sugar levels, all this, that, and the other, kidney problems, when it changes, your cells begin to pass perfect information one cell to the other. What's that called? That's called healing. That's what it's called, healing. I find that to be amazing. Totally amazing. Anyway, the part that got me was not to... See, I'm familiar with the systems and the body, but the rock texture really got to me. It did. It got to me. The texture of the rocks got to me. I mean, it pierced me, because to change the texture of a rock without touching it or anything else, and make them uniform, that is out there. Done with something so small, something anybody can produce. It's amazing to me. It really is. Amazing. You know what's even more amazing is that your words carry a resonance. But most importantly, your emotions carry a resonance. Do you know that? Your emotions carry a resonance. And when other people are around you, they can pick up that resonance and discern what emotion you're exhibiting. Do you know that? Your emotions, they change the frequency in your body or not. They really do. If you feel elated and happy and joyful, your body goes into a healing phase. When you are depressed, your immune system begins to die off. Viruses activate in the presence of the emotion called depression. That is utterly astounding. So that when you feel negative, It's almost like you're a part of darkness, or you promote darkness into your own life. Have you guys ever noticed that when you feel secure in the Lord, blessings start coming your way? Things don't break down. There's repair in people's lives, all sorts of things. But as soon as you start feeling negative, your appliances start breaking, your car malfunctions, little different things begin to happen, your computer, your device will not work right, all sorts of things. And you can certainly come into proximity with someone who is depressed and pick up on it without even seeing them. Just like a person can stare at you from 50 feet away in a crowd, and you can turn around and feel the other person staring at you. Why? Because that type of focus changes the resonance of the human body. This is measurable by simple equipment. If you had an instrument amplifier, right, and a counter, you could actually effectively measure the change in frequency of your own body based upon how you feel. Isn't that something? I think that is astounding. And these things are real. Yet, most people, the suicide rate really went up when Wi-Fi was first kicked in. That 2.4 gigahertz is a human frequency. It can disrupt your mind. One of the number one killers of today and what people suffer with the most is dementia. Do you know that? Dementia is a product of that same frequency. That's the side effect. That ringing tinnitus that everybody fears. Do you know how the ear works? If you hear a persistent noise, first of all, you have hairs in your ears. Over time, those hairs begin to curl. They don't vibrate as much, which means you become hard of hearing. But tinnitus is nothing more than an adaptation of your brain based upon what's coming into your ear. So here it goes. You hear a persistent frequency in your ear, right? A hum or a buzz, in most cases your alarm clock. And so what your body does is, because it's so frequent, it tunes that specific frequency out, right? It does that. It tunes it out. Right? When it tunes it out, it's not that the sound went away. It's that it lowers the volume of that one sound. This is something your brain does automatically. So that when you're in a quiet place, and then everything is equal because everything is quiet, you begin to hear that frequency again that your body lowered the volume of. The frequency is still there. It can still be heard. You know, all this began with a hum. People were experiencing this hum, and it was causing people to kill themselves and everything else. They later found out that this was a generated hum by a few electrical components. Since then, they have changed things because it was well in the range of the human ear. Right now, this offset in frequencies, because we have so many transmitters transmitting frequencies all over the place, there is a band of frequencies that your ear can certainly pick up. Right? If you have a very high frequency, here's what happens. Suppose you have 28 kilohertz. Now, you can't pick this up with the human ear. Suppose you have 28 kilohertz. Then you send out another signal of 110 kilohertz. The difference between the two signals is going to cause a brand new one that could fall in the range of 110 hertz, which you can pick up and hear. So then the differences in all these frequencies, what you're hearing is the difference of them. So it's going to sound like a high-pitched type of thing. The ringing in your ears. But because it's not constant or steady, guess what happens? When you're in a quiet place and start going to sleep, there you are. You start hearing that frequency. One time, there was a power outage when I was a kid, and I heard no ringing, nothing. In this day and age, it's almost like everybody is hearing this ringing. Everybody. Why? It just so happens that this condition began to spread around when Wi-Fi began to be in everybody's homes. Wi-Fi is at 2.4 gigahertz. Why that frequency? Look up that frequency in the human body. That's a biological frequency, just in case you did not know. Why would they pick a biological frequency that would transmit things called Wi-Fi? Experimentation. And of course, some of those ringings, well, that's a different topic altogether, because it sounds like a perfected scale version of it's a set of mechanical tones, perfect mechanical tones. It's equidistance. Each frequency steps down or steps up, right? It may last for 2 seconds, the next one lasts for 2 seconds, and the next one lasts for 2 seconds until it goes all the way away. In fact, it will either go up so high until you can't hear it anymore, then it's gone, or it will drop low. It'll go dee, 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 and the other ones go up, dee, 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 and it keeps going up until you can't hear it anymore. That is not tinnitus. That's not tinnitus. That's not tinnitus at all. And it's not some guy playing a little keyboard in your ear either. All these things happening. And you know what? But they understand that people normally go for the big story, the big fish, and they ignore these small things. Now, how many of us, if all the power went out and we started hearing that ringing, how many people do you think would go mad? How many? If they kept hearing it with no escape. How many people would go mad? Right? How many? Quite a few. It's irritating, annoying, causes aggression, and everything else. If you research these things, you're going to see an escalation of human behavior on the aggressive side. People are highly annoyed at one another all the time. Highly annoyed at one another. They really are. What's the Bible say about that? That men would go mad and slay their brother. All these things told of us by our Father. They're right there in the Word of God. When you start to think very simple, and you're not really programmed by all these theories, your brain is not warped by theories and scenarios and everything else, you begin to have insight into the very tiny things on which the big things are built. But I can tell you this, if your premise is wrong, everything that's built atop of it is going to crumble. If the basis of your understanding is flawed, anything developed upon that understanding is going to crumble. Jesus should be the basis of our understanding, and nothing should ever take his place as the cornerstone. Everything ought to be aligned with Christ Jesus. Because if it isn't, your foundation is flawed. And if that is the case, no matter how much time and effort and money you put into the home on top of that foundation, it's going to fall one day. If a foundation is flawed, it does not matter how straight, how beautiful the house looks or the structure looks. One day it's going to fall. That's something. Folks, you all better go to bed. I thought I'd share that with you guys, so that you're not, so that you're informed about how simple things can really be. I mean, they are simple and obvious, and they're so obvious no one looks for them. They're too simple to understand. People like complicated scenarios, right? They like the hunt. They like the adventure. It's kind of like if we discussed how a light switch works. Well, that's a boring subject. Well, so is half the things that are going on in this world. But I have to make a point. I don't give man all that credit I hear a lot of people say, well, the Illuminati is doing this, that, and the other. I don't give them all that credit. I will never give Luciferian Satanists that type of credit to say that they're so smart that they have deceived the entire world, even the saints. We know that's impossible. Satan and And no man, the Antichrist, the devil himself, cannot deceive the very elect. We know this. It's not possible to deceive the very elect. Is there anything we can do for the ring? Yes. Of course there is. Of course there is. And don't worry, I'm going to share as much as I can with you guys. But the answers to some of these things are so simple, they do blow your mind. Because you'll say, well, why didn't I think of that? And those who don't know anything about it, they'll say, well, this thing is really working. But there's no electricity involved. How does that work? Why is the body responding this way? See, one thing that gets me about the body of Christ is that the Lord has blessed us with technical expertise, the passion to learn certain things, but we refuse to work together, or we pick and choose who we're going to work with. If we allowed the Lord to team us up, we'd be powerful. We would. But the problem is, we team up based upon the vision we develop in our own little brains. That's what we do. And when that takes place, well, we're operating on our own. And we're trying to get God to bless our own steps. If we follow Christ, then your steps are ordered of the Lord. But if you follow yourselves, then all you're going to do is end up asking God to bless what you have come up with. That's where we shouldn't be. Right? That's where we shouldn't be. So then, environmental changes, plant life, everything can strongly be affected by what? A change in frequency. This device is about 13 inches by 13 inches. And it worked in the radius of miles. There's no way you can have fertile ground in White Sands. There's nothing alive out there. That'd be like saying, I'm going to go start a farm in the salt flats. But I'm telling you now that DNA can be manipulated or distorted. It can be distorted with frequencies. That's precisely what Tesla's research. A lot of people, as of late, they're all into Tesla. And no one can seem to find some hidden documents. But a long, long time ago, I looked into Tesla and found out that he discovered how to use the ether. And that was the big secret. He discovered this. He prototyped a few things. While everybody else was looking at electricity, Tesla said this. Tesla said, it is the ether that avails itself from my experiments. And if that can be harnessed, you don't need electricity anymore. You don't need medicine either. How beautiful is that? While they're hunting for death rays and all this other stuff, Tesla evidently found out the differences in potential of two specific things and harnessed the power of the ether, which is a name given to a substance that really defies the properties we are familiar with, because he is the one that specifically said that magnetism and electricity are present in the finding of the ether. But once it is discovered, there's no need for electricity and all these other things. Einstein was obsessed with the ether. He was obsessed with it. But Einstein is the one that called Nikola Tesla the greatest mind humanity has ever had. Because that's what Einstein thought of Tesla. Before they whooshed away all of his papers, all of his research and everything else. Why? Because if you come out with a cure, let me explain this to you guys. If you come up with a way that a family can live without the need of doctors, power, and industry, you will have effectively and single-handedly brought down all the little games they play as they prepare to save their own lives. You will have stopped all the stupid things for them. And do you know why they don't want that? Because they're trying to perpetuate their own bloodlines. And they use everything they can do to extract materials from the earth to get the people to concentrate those materials in specific areas. That's what they do. They have to get other folks to mine the minerals for them. They have to get other folks to produce the pharmaceutical products they're going to need, maybe long term. They're utilizing the labor of the world for 6 specific families. 6 families. Isn't that something? And still to this day, they don't give Tesla credit for what he's the one responsible for the cell phone, actually, for the communications chip in the cell phone. It works off of his principle. He developed cellular communications. He did supply electricity through the ground to an entire city. He did that. Tesla did that. And that same guy found something that really threatened how they control humanity. And so they killed him. See that? Can you imagine that? When Tesla was alive, he'd already come up with wireless communication, remote controls, all that stuff. That's before they had TV and radio all over the place. Tesla came up with things that were so far ahead of him. And he patented them too. And they sealed his patents. Isn't that awful? That is so awful. But that's the way the world goes. So, listen guys, again, you can spend your lifetime looking for the mysteries of what they did so long ago. But it's not going to lift you up. It's not. We have a problem here. Our preparations mean everything. Because do you know what? If you think you're just preparing for yourselves, you're preparing for the wrong reasons. In your preparations, you're going to demonstrate to folks, I can do it. Because these frequencies being injected into the earth, these charged particles being injected into the earth, all these things happening to the earth are degrading people physically. There are more people this day with cancers all over the place. People are suffering with breathing problems now. Lots of hospitals are having to get blood thinners because of blood clots. I explained that a long time ago about not a long time ago, but a few months back with the blood clots. Lots of people are having blood clots. Now, what causes a blood clot? What causes a blood clot in the first place? It is an irregularity of a cell. It is the hardening and the blockage of certain veins in your systems, chemicals that shouldn't be in the body, calcified material floating all over the place. Because if you don't get the right calcium, your body makes it. So I'll share this, guys. Mankind, everything they attempted to control that was in nature, they had messed it up because they tried to control, they're controlling dairy products, they tried to control how chickens grow, and they messed it up. They totally tore it up. Anything they attempt to control, they cannot do it like the Father. They always find out that if they control one thing, 20 million other things depended upon that one. So now that they changed that, they have to change 20 million other things, and they can't do it. Weather modification is another. What is the side effect? Chemical injection of the populace. Everything they attempt to control, they destroy. So does a controlling spirit. Oh, boy. Yeah, well, that's something. They're doing it. What do we need to do? We are the ones who have been given authority within ourselves to spread God's control. But now remember this. The Lord is giving the beast, the Antichrist, and Satan time, their time, for their beast system. Only a little time. Only a little time. Folks, I'm going to have to skedaddle. Time to go to work. God bless you guys. I hope to see you all tomorrow. I do. I'm going to be back here at COT at about 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You may catch me in the chat room. I'll be working in there, in the chat room. I'm getting excited again. I can't tell you why now, but I'm very excited like a kid. I really am. And I'm so thankful, guys. I'm so thankful. So I'm going to shuffle off and so that I can meet my deadlines and be back here at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you guys get rest, though, okay? Get some rest. Get some rest. I want to say God bless you guys. You guys are an awesome family. You really are an awesome... You know, I just wish we could carry this on every single day. The same respect. The same love. Same tenderness. Right? Same honor. The same values. And I know that we can, but the question is, will we? I can't speak for you, but I will. I give no alternative. I will continue this way. God bless each of you. And again, it's always good to see you guys. Always. Thomas, God bless you. Ex-Heathen, God bless you. Patacake, Susie, Glenda, Connie, Pooh Bear, Valerie. Good to see you guys in here. Good to see you ladies in here. I can finally see the chat room. Selena, God bless you. Grateful, God bless you. Robin, God bless you. Glenda, God bless you. Robin says 2 a.m. are Michael's best talks. Yeah, it seems to be that way. I guess because it's almost like the devils are sleeping. They're absent. They have to get the rest so they can go disturb somebody else. That's what it seems like. They're getting geared up for tomorrow. You know what? Guys, I noticed something. I'm going to say this, and I really have to go. When I was young, I couldn't stand it when everybody woke up. Because before, when I was young, at about 4 a.m., I would get up in the morning. Now, I was very young. That was the most peaceful time for me on the face of the earth. There were only 2 times of the day that were peaceful for me. 4 a.m., and guess what? I didn't have to look at a clock. I could begin to sense confusion, hatred, all these emotions popping up in the atmosphere. And every time I would do that, I would take note, it is 6 or 6:30. When people arose, they polluted the atmosphere with negative emotions. And then I began to observe the evening times. When everybody began to go to sleep, peace came back. So long as people were sleeping, it's almost like the earth was at peace. And as soon as they woke up, it's almost like chaos ensued. But I think for a long time, even from my childhood, I've always been sensitive to what's going on inside of people, always. And from a child, I deeply cared about people big time. So much negativity I used to see. It used to hurt me. It did. It was almost like a physical pain that would hurt me, the negativity, because I never understood why they would be so hateful. See, I don't like hate and violence. I don't like those things. I can't even live by those things. And I'm still sensitive to them. Like a baby. It's just that I can do something about it now. Right? But back then I couldn't. I didn't like negativity and things like that. But I found that there was no safe place to go away from it. It was everywhere. Something. I would go so far as to say it was a few of you like that. When people started getting up, that's when the confusion came in. But right before they woke up, it was such a peace in God's creation. Such a peace. And people were not appreciative. I would observe people getting up and they were griping and complaining. And I'm over here, I was thinking, why can't they be thankful in God's earth? I used to always call it God's earth. It's God's earth, right? Why don't they be thankful in God's earth? They didn't have to be in God's earth today. There were certain things when I was young I just knew. Anybody else like that? You just know them, like life and death. I always understood the concept of life and death this way, though. People are born, and that's when you feel sorry for them. Every time I saw a newborn baby, most people smile. I was so worried when I was young for those babies, because they would have to grow up and endure even the things that I saw. And when a person died, everybody would cry, but I would be so thankful that that person never has to endure the violence of other people again. I was totally backward. The truth is, when I went to my first funeral, I did not know what to do, because I wasn't going to cry, and I was so happy they were free. And so I began to cry anyway, because I was so happy they were free. But I really did look around like, what am I supposed to do? Because I'm not feeling like these people are. But what I observed from people was selfishness. They cried because they always said, they left me. I had a relative that suffered a lot. I do remember being angry at a cousin of mine because they were so selfish. They were angry that they left. And I just looked at the person and said, how selfish is humanity? That you would rather a person suffer on their deathbed than to be free of the pain. How selfish is that? You'd rather them suffer and stay than to leave and be free? I never could understand that type of selfishness. That certainly is not in me. It isn't. Okay, folks. Let's all go to bed. How about that one? God bless you, folks. God bless you greatly. Hey, Jesus is alive and well. So is our Father. And He's coming back. He's coming back. And all these things must come to pass. And the generation that sees all these things, that generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. All the signs, all the indications of the completion of the revelation of Jesus Christ will happen in the duration of one generation that beholds all those things. And do you not know that right now, this very day, I keep asking everybody to listen to the language. Yesterday or last night, I said, listen to peace and safety, or peace and security. Please listen for that. The next one I want you to listen to is Israel is surrounded. Like a trumpet, they are announcing it. Don't trumpets announce? Well, then the trumpets are announcing. Now, don't they? My. It seems like every day they're doing it. Every day. And that's what they're going for. Now, it doesn't matter who it comes through. It matters that it comes through. It does not mean the person that comes through is evil. But you better believe there are some powerful principalities over Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter who the person is. Make no mistake, principalities and powers run Washington, D.C. So stop giving the Illuminati all the credit. Folks, God bless you. I love each of you. God bless you guys. Take care. I'll see everyone tomorrow. And rest. Rest well. God bless you all.